Hey.
Hello. Welcome to the Blind Squirrel Twitch channel. We have two beards for you today. Yeah. So, hello, Captain Crispy.
Sort of.
I see you're already excited about
Bring on the beards.
Hello. All right, so today we have... thanks for the host.
Sweet.
Vision
Thank
Zivo.
you. Visions.
If I'm pronouncing that right.
It's so hard to know.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Hi, Brad from BSG. Scoot in a bit.
Who's that?
Yeah, who's that?
Jinx.
So today we're going to be talking about the evolution of drifters. Well, just kind of the evolution of how a game, the entire, evolution of a game. But we're going to use drifters as, since we're working on that, as the examples. So Dell here, if you didn't see him before, he's our lead designer on drifters. So tell any of the newbies a little bit about yourself.
Just a quick recap. I've been doing this about 25 years now. Most famous for... Why, thank you, Captain Crispy. I've been doing this for about 25 years. I'm most famous for the original Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, and also Clive Barker's Undying. I have been involved with designing and kind of creating games both on licensed products and on original products for a long time. And it's very gratifying, but also can be very intense. A lot of my background is multiplayer action shooters and things like that. So when we decided to bring me on along with Hayden to come in and help this company build their first multiplayer game and first original IP, we were definitely going to be drawn to kind of our strengths. Hayden having his action background and me having my and me having my multiplayer background and shooter background. So that's a lot of what we've been focused on. And so you'll kind of see, it'll be interesting to show you the early screenshots of where what we called Supermass at the time started and how it has evolved into what we now call drifters. You'll see similarities, then you'll see a lot of places where we kind of found our own identity for the game. So
yeah, and we have Nathan also, he was on it from a very early stage, just a little bit before you came on. So he has like a little insight as to what the kind of seed was and where it sprouted from there after you came in. Yeah. So what was the the original concept? What was the very first start?
Yeah, so Supermass sort of first started from this idea of wanting to it started from a core of wanting to have some crazy traversal mechanics and abilities on the characters as well. And what they came up with there, Eric, I don't know if we have any of the images, but what we came up with, or what the team at the time came up with, because I wasn't actually part of the development of this, but what the team came up with was these kind of almost like Mario Galaxy-esque planets that you can run around with this kind of really vibrant, low poly art style, and you jump between the planets and you're trying to capture them and shoot each other, blow each other up. And this is where we got our grappling mechanics from, and so that kind of was the kernel for what turned into drifters. And Dell, when you came in for your interview, you gave a breakdown of this, and I don't know if you want to go forward.
Because they had you play test what they had, and then you basically.
Yeah, so I came in, didn't rip it apart. I came in and, they created this original demo pretty quickly, and it was a couple programmers that did it, and there definitely was kernels of really interesting ideas. It had a lot more MOBA elements to it, that you were trying to capture territories, so you would go stand on a planet and slowly it would colorize to your team, and then you could generate little robots that would go to other planets and try to help you fight them. The things that were cool about it was the grappling was definitely cool. It was really fun to move around on the gravity objects, which is kind of the Mario Galaxy spheres, and we actually had donut-shaped planets we could go to. We had that black hole that you would avoid that actually tried to suck you in, but you could kind of swing around it. And so we really got into kind of the elements of movement we thought were really interesting. But we found kind of the MOBA elements to be a little bit distracting, and combat on these spheres. If you're standing here and another guy is just over here, barely any difference, the planet's mocking most of your view, and it's really hard to get kind of line of sight on each other when you are trying to actually engage and fight. And then the other problem was you would have people on another planet way over here firing at you, and you had no idea bullets were incoming, because like now my frame of reference, I'm looking this way, trying to fight someone on a planet this way, and bullets are just coming randomly from turrets and from other players, and that's where it got confusing, and the combat was not very satisfying.
We have a question from JRC West. What brought on the focus on grappling mechanics? Was it just an idea that was prototyped and felt good? Right.
So JRC, what I was getting at was when we played the demo, the grappling was probably the most powerful idea coming out of what the demo was, of what was already active when I came to the company. And so what we said was, well, what if we thought about grappling and said, what if we try to give it more purpose? Like, why would people have a grappling hook? Why do these abilities let them maybe go do stuff that no one else could? And so we started to play with this idea of, well, what if the grappling hook and a little bit of this kind of drifting element were all about kind of trying to plunder and raid unique locations? And so I started to talk a little bit more about this kind of raider piracy fantasy and saying, well, these are the only guys that kind of do this. Now, the joke is kind of, we said, in Armageddon, the guys that drill oil rigs are the only people that can go and blow up the asteroid. So not the best example, but it was kind of this idea that these drifters, these guys that had this special skill set of using the grappling hook and using drifting packs, were kind of the only people crazy enough to go and do these missions that other people. Indiana Jones in Space is a great.
Oh, I like that. We haven't heard that one before yet.
So that's a great analogy. The other one we thought about a lot are like
Character 9.
The fire jumpers that will like literally fly over and drop into the middle of a firestorm or a big forest fire. They will fly into the middle of it, and like they're just crazy enough and just specially trained enough to be the only guys that really do that job. And so with us, we started being more and more drawn to this idea of the drifters being these guys that hang out at the Exiles bar when they're off duty, but when they get the call, they race into these dangerous environments where their skills are the skills that are needed to basically plunder and rob and raid these places. So that was a fantasy that started to kind of bubble up. The other one, and I don't know if we have any character shots of who was running around on those little planets from the original Supermass.
I don't know if I provided a great one for that, but
anyway, the other thing we had was the characters that were in the original Supermass demo were these little. The whole thing had a little bit of a Katamari Damacy kind of feel to it, where the little characters were also kind of simplistic, and they had little radio heads when they were running around. And we were like, there's not much for players to attach to, and we obviously Overwatch being an inspiration for us, we really like the idea of like pushing more towards like really fun, over-the-top characters with rich personality, especially because we also want to embrace not just the hero shooter for who the characters are, but also giving you unique abilities so that each character would play differently when they went to these environments. So that was the other thing that really prompted us to say, look, while there's some really interesting kernels going on with what Supermass originally was, where like for this to be a richer product that has more of a lifetime, I think that we wanted to build characters with strong personality and unique ways of playing. And what we ran into with the little Radiohead guys was, and apologies, I'm not trying to quote the band, was that they weren't very distinctive, and that we needed some way. Like one of the things that's important in video games, especially hero shooters, or if you want a master class on it, go look at what Valve does when they talk about Team Fortress 2. but you want characters to have very distinct silhouettes so that when you see them and you see big burly sumo running at you, you know without a doubt that that's a tank, that he is coming, he's going to be hard to kill, strong and a lot of a lot of resistance. Bunch of paranoid androids. It's true. I don't want to be stuck in a lot of lawsuits.
Radiohead jokes.
Yes. But the idea was, one of the things we want to embrace is this idea of strong silhouette, strong, clear purpose on the battlefield, and that you have a certain expectation when you see a certain character come on screen of how I will engage them, what tactics I might need to do. Like Sumo, everything about him that you learn pretty quickly is he is a close range fighter. So if you're playing a nimble character like a Zola or a Resistor, your main job is trying to keep distance so Sumo doesn't just wreck house on you. Right. So you start to get into strategies and interactions and a little bit of the rock, paper, scissors logic of like, who do I need to be careful of on the battlefield and how can I interact with them? And we felt, once again, with these little kind of nondescript characters that was something that we wanted to try to advance, advance the game on and improve on and take it there. And also, this is my opinion, but I also felt what we had with Supermass was a very strong kind of indie project. And I thought it was really cool for that. But if we wanted to get to the point of like launching this and kind of not necessarily targeting AAA space, because that's a very convoluted statement with lots of positives and negatives these days. But if we wanted to really say, hey, this is Blind Squirrel's first, public outing of saying, hey, we can make great games too, and we want to show you guys everything we can do, we felt that we wanted to shoot towards something that had a different personality and more polish.
It looks really cute. I like that look, kind of like a little big planet.
Yeah, there's parts that were really neat about it, like the way the colors worked. Like you'd stand on a planet and it would start to change color, and the flowers would change color, and all these things.
Some really cool stuff there.
Like some of those elements, I really, really appreciated, and I thought the thinking behind it was great. But the MOBA thing, combined with nondescript characters, combined with really hard to understand combat. Just like as a designer,
your opponent was always on the other side of a hill.
Yeah,
like,
or you're
always
constantly jumping just to try to get an angle on this person, and so it was very the uniqueness of it. Like everyone enjoyed it for 15 minutes, and then it kind of shifted into frustration. And so, as a designer, and especially with my background, I just said, well, what are the ways to make this broader and more accessible? And so we made the choices we made to start pulling it more towards. What Drifters has become. Yeah. So probably a good example is to then start talking about when I first came in and started to build Stranded, and eventually I handed that off to Derek Warner. But the initial thought with building something like Stranded was to say, rather than nondescript planets or things, like one thing that really happened in the old version of Supermass was you got disoriented really quickly. You did not have a sense of landmarking or where to go because everything looked a little too samey. And so one of my first goals with Stranded was the idea of like, well, let's put you on a truly memorable location. You're on a stranded starship in the middle of an asteroid belt, and there's obviously, because now it's a ship, where the prow is, where the back end of the ship is. We put a huge conning tower in the middle of the ship to be kind of a landmark that you can always find. So you had a really strong sense of orientation. These were all things that I think were important when you're trying to create a shooter and you want players to be very verbally be able to talk to each other quickly and say, I'm near the conning tower, I'm at the front of the ship, I'm at the back of the ship, I'm below deck. You want to think about level design in that way, where how can I quickly verbalize to my teammates where I am? And then if you go back and look at what Supermass was, you're like, I think I'm on the blue planet, but the blue planet
could be red,
right,
or green,
or green, or all sorts of other things. So your ability to verbalize and quickly say, meet me here, was near impossible. And so one of my big rules when you build levels is you think about levels as being 5 landmarks. And these are significant, easy to communicate locations that then orient players or let them shorthand how to communicate where they're trying to be or how you can create tactics.
Yeah.
Another question from JRC West. I love the rock, paper, scissors mentality of Team Fortress 2. Not sure if this was asked already, but do players have the ability to swap characters mid-game? Or like MOBAs, are players locked in when the game starts?
So we are going to explore this. I think certain modes we're going to want to encourage people to lock in because we might want to not necessarily have 3 resistors running around. We want to kind of say, if someone's chosen resistor on your team, you can't also be him. But we also will probably have some more friendly arcade modes that just say, who cares, anything goes. Jump in and have 5 resistors on the team if you want.
Which could be fun.
Yeah. And as I said, like that's one thing I really do like about
homing missiles everywhere.
Part of what, yeah, exactly, lots of explosions. We have explosions. So there are a lot of, what I like about what Overwatch has is they have their maps that are ranked, and you have certain rules you need to live by. But then they have their arcade mode that basically says, do whatever, and we might swap those out. We might have special rules they're playing. Maybe people refresh their abilities quicker. We could have a lot of fun in that space of kind of doing mutators or doing different ways for people to experience the game. But then we want to have a more consistent mode where people, are encouraged to learn how to play different characters. Because that's one of the things I like about the MOBA mindset is, well, since you can only be one type of character in that map, now to really be a good player is to know 4 or 5 characters and be able to switch between them depending on the map you want to play on or the strategies that you guys are trying to accomplish. To create a hero shooter, you want people to see the value in how different characters play.
Mm-hmm. And then that's also good because I know that I've gone into League and Overwatch and kind of chosen a character that I thought would be the one that I liked, and then didn't really enjoy them that much and thought that I didn't enjoy the game as a whole, and then talk to someone and you're like, oh, well, this is what I'd like to do, and they go, oh, you should play that character, and I was like, oh, they were right. Why? These are the characters.
You found your character.
Yeah, I found the character and still understand the value of the other ones.
I had a question, just going back a little bit, for these the very earliest Supermass stuff. How did that? You guys may not know this. How did that come about? Was it a bunch of people sitting in a room going, let's come up with an idea? Was it people working on their own idea and bringing it to the table?
So it was originally a pitch for our kind of internal IP process. I think it actually came from our then head of engineering, but now COO, Matt Fawcett. That's my recollection. I could be wrong. But kind of the Mario Galaxy MOBA shooter, I think, if I remember correctly. And then that was something where we worked on it for a little bit, and then people had to get moved on to our contract projects, which at the time was how we were making all of our money.
Right.
And as a part of the effort to revive that and really fully commit to having an IP that we're proud of and launching that, we brought on Hayden, Dell, obviously, and started building this design team as well as a whole team for IP.
Very cool. And so, since you've been on, worked on so many games, is that a similar process? Because I've always wondered, when you have a company that's so big, does it just seriously come down to the creative director's idea or the designer's idea, or is it, when you see these giant games come out, something that I love Skyrim, for example. It's is that just one guy going, we're doing this now? Right. Or is this a big process that comes with a lot of spitballing? And
it really, there's 100 different ways it can happen. Skyrim is literally the 6th or 7th iteration of a similar idea that Bethesda's been working on with the Elder Scrolls world for a long time. So they're actually on a march of starting with Daggerfall and even before that, I think Arena, of building kind of this really big world that you can do all these adventures in. And they've actually almost been refining that for the last 20 years.
I think Skyrim, the pitch for Skyrim was Oblivion, but make the world feel more lived in. Right. And I think that was their actual pitch for Skyrim, essentially.
But it's different when you have an established franchise, right?
Right. Well, so if you don't have if you're starting something completely from scratch, let's do something completely new.
So I still would caveat that a little bit. You have completely new. then you have like, we have a licensing opportunity here. What can we do with it? So that's what Star Wars Battlefront was basically Pandemic. I wasn't there when this pitch happened, but Pandemic went to Lucas and said, we already did Clone Wars for you. How would you feel if we took that engine and some of that logic and tried to emulate Battlefield 1942, but with Star Wars? So that was kind of the core pitch there.
Right.
And, you know, these are, like, I call these the chocolate and peanut butter pitches. It's like two great tastes that go great together. So, you know, a lot of pitches live that way. I mean, the big joke in Hollywood is like, it's Die Hard on a train, right? Like, it's always like, this plus this is why. It's like you're trying to say, why is it familiar enough that we have an audience? And then why is it unique enough that we're going to actually be popular or grab
interest people,
right? So it's very rare to really be able to pitch full original IP. When I pitched Undying, which was a horror game, what it really was Steven Spielberg at the time, because I was at DreamWorks. Steven Spielberg was working on the Haunting of Hill House, I believe was the name of the movie. And he was like, well, look, I'd really love to see you guys be working on a horror game while we're working on this. And so I was one of the two people that pitched basically an idea of like, yeah, let's do a haunted house game, but we're going to do it on the west coast of Ireland in the 1920s. And he was totally in. It wasn't directly associated to the Haunting of Hill House, but it was definitely a horror themed game. And it really helps when Steven Spielberg says, I like that idea.
Yeah, people
it really kind of opens some gates for you and streamlines the process in that situation. So
he has some sway.
He has some sway. So that was actually really pleasant because of that, it probably opened a bunch of doors for us that normally would have been harder to
people
get
would have been
through.
like, what are you talking about?
Right,
In Ireland.
Oh, yeah. So when I did Undying, first-person horror games didn't exist. Everyone was like, well, horror, that's always third person because really Resident Evil was the only defined horror game out there outside of Alone in the Dark. And so they were like, what do you mean you want to do a first-person horror game? And then the other really fun, I'm sorry we're totally getting off topic for a second, but this is a fun story. So then I inherited the team that did Trespasser. I know a lot of you guys don't know what Trespasser is anymore, but
Eric does.
Eric does.
Everyone's favorite anonymous person does.
So I inherited the team that did Trespasser, and so the first thing I got was my boss was down in my room going, right, so you're going to cast spells with one hand and you're going to shoot weapons with the other hand, but like, how are you going to do that? And I was really confused because I was like, left mouse button, cast spells, right mouse button, shoot weapons. But for those of you that are familiar with what Trespasser was, they had like a 6-button configuration just to get your hand to aim a gun at stuff. And literally you're like twisting. No. You had one set of keys that twisted your wrist, another set of keys that tried to lift your arm. It was an arm simulator. And so it was
ahead of its time. You know, it could have been the VR various simulator games. Yeah.
There's some very interesting things they tried to do with Trespasser. The arm simulator was not one of them. So anyway, what I realized halfway through the conversation was that my boss was terrified that I was going to do multi-arm simulator. And I'm like, no, dude. Literally like traditional shooter mechanics, left button fires. The only difference was I was able to basically, what was it? Guns from this hand, spells from this hand. And so when you hit the buttons, you just were able to toggle back and forth between the two. I mean, now BioShock does it, and a bunch of other games do very similar controls at times. But it's one of those things where back then that was unheard of. And because of the legacy of Trespasser, they were freaking out thinking I was going to go crazy with multi-arm simulator, which was definitely not the direction I was going.
Who were we just talking to about the game that you had to literally walk? Like it was. Are
you talking about QWOP?
Is that what it was?
The like running.
You had to do a different, combination to move.
There are a few games like that. It's a niche thing.
Yeah,
they made a fighting game that did that.
So everyone's excited that Eric has made his
graced us with his presence.
He said, "What up?" And shit!
I got to break something to you guys. Eric doesn't have a beard.
Yeah, we told this to him.
I don't know if he's tibias. Yeah.
Actually,
if you go up, there was a comment
about matchmaking from some ghost.
So, I was also going to say though that JRC West mentioned that Sunset Overdrive was supposed to be a typical zombie survival game until an engineer decided to add a skateboard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of that actually. I mean, Yeah.
And you got to be careful with that. Sometimes because the technology gets added in, everyone's like, well, we have it, we might as well keep it. And that can really muddle the message. I'm not meaning that with Sunset. I'm just saying there are certain games where someone's like, well, I built it, so we should leave it in. And then it completely, you want to be pure in the vision of what your game is. Mm-hmm. And so, great example, at Pandemic, we did a game called Saboteur. And 3 of the mechanics in Saboteur, fire
him, he needs a beard. Oh no, they've turned on Eric.
So in Saboteur, the fantasy of the Saboteur is like, I'm in Paris, I'm trying to destroy stuff, I'm trying to be sneaky, I'm trying to basically help the resistance fight. So if you're going to think about that as mechanic-wise, there's some very clear mechanics that support that fantasy. But then they had car racing, where you every once in a while just had to race cars to basically beat the Nazis. And then you also had moments where you would get into like full circle fisticuff fights with Nazis. And while those mechanics in and of their own are like kind of fun and interesting, Nazis tended to shoot you when you tried to do stuff like that. So it didn't feel, in my mind, like it supported the core fantasy. But because someone had built those mechanics, they got left in, and it therefore, I feel, sometimes muddled kind of the vision of what the game was, because if we had been true about it, we should have probably streamlined and said, well, the Saboteur is really about destruction, sneaking, and kind of building up the resistance. And those should be the core driving mechanics for that game.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes, where one of the things that we've tried to do is like say, okay, like what's the core of our game? Right. What needs to support? What do we need to support that? What do we need to like not support that? Although that can also be hard, like a hard thing to find as well, because like you look at Rocket League, you look at even Fortnite, right, where they spent like years and years and set piles of money on fire, which they're doing great now, but like. Definitely was some exploring to find.
Same with though any creative intent, like any creative piece of work, whether you're writing a novel or a play or a video game, mm-hmm. It's finding out. It's all the extraneous stuff needs to be gotten rid of so that you just have the core essence of what you're trying to get at. Otherwise, mm-hmm. It's not going to be. People might not know what's wrong with it, but something's going to be off.
Right. Yeah. Well, editing is as powerful a device as just blue sky creativity. In fact. Honing a game and refining a game is very much about the editing process, not simply like, well, we made something, right? Yeah. You actually have to make it feel right. It has to make sense to players. Like at some point, some of the best games feel instinctual to you, right? Even like Titanfall 2 to me, if you guys haven't played that campaign, that single player campaign is mind-blowingly cool and really feels instinctual. There's very few places where I'm like, oh, you guys screwed me on that. Like normally I had a very clear picture of what I was supposed to do, and if I messed up, I knew it was my fault, not that the game kind of played some sort of trick on me or mm-hmm. something like that. So I feel those are great examples of when you look at games and go, oh my God, they balanced it right. They made the right choices to support the right fantasy. So anyway, I think we probably wandered off.
Is there a place that you, though, like to play? Like he was saying that, with Sunset Overdrive, which is a very successful game, they added in a skateboard. So there's, got to be a creative moments where you're just like, let's play around. Let's see, to come up with new stuff. Because sometimes you'll discover things that's like, well, shit, who knew that would work? And it ends up being a good idea. A lot of time it ends up being shit.
Totally. No, I mean, I think ultimately probably the skateboard prompted them into doing the whole suite of parkour and traversal stuff. I mean, heavily borrowed from Jet Set Radio, but they had an opportunity to. Oh, Eric wants whiskey. Keep him happy.
It'll put a beard on your face, hopefully.
Yeah. So, like it can totally, like that experimentation, I don't want to downplay that. It's just that even if you experiment with it, it doesn't mean, or even because you put it in the game at one point, doesn't mean it should stay in the game.
Right. Only if it serves the purpose of
with
the game.
Sunset Overdrive, I think it brought them to the realization of somewhere like shooter plus Jet Set Radio is a cool concept. They should run with it. So I think that became the nucleus of that game. I do know they went through a lot of growing pains on that. So what they finally found is awesome.
Yeah.
But he was saying that, the skateboard thing came from a jam situation the studio was doing where the devs were permitted to try out their own things. So that was probably they were probably struggling and went.
Oh,
you guys fucking try it.
Yeah. But I mean,
have at it.
But I mean, let's flip it. There's already with drifters, to bring it a little bit back on topic, is we have already experimented with a number of mechanics that we put in because they fix problems we had at the time. Mm-hmm. But as we got more refined in our core control set, we realized those mechanics were not necessary anymore. So we used to have the ability, if you hit a wall, if you pulled on the stick or pushed on the stick, you would actually do a trick flying off the wall. And it's because our grapple wasn't working the way we expected it. So we started inventing a mechanic to let you compensate for a frustration we are having, where wall tricks was trying to fix a problem. But once we got grapple feeling better, the wall tricks started to feel unnecessary. And in fact, were a little confusing. Yeah. And so they are now on the cutting room floor. We had also swing nodes, which was this idea that there's these crystals in the world. And if you would shoot them, you wouldn't go to them, you would go close to them. And so you could kind of set up some paths to swing through the world. But once our core grapple got better, we didn't need swing nodes anymore. Right. The whole world was swing nodes. Yeah, anything I attached to, as long as I pushed the stick, I could rotate around and do tricks, or I wouldn't go straight to the point. I could rise above, I could slide left or right, I could even swing underneath. And once again, the swing nodes as a mechanic just died because we didn't need them anymore in that way. Now we have other things we've added in as replacements, but that's kind of a snapshot of kind of the evolution of as you're trying to find the voice of your game. It's okay to experiment with these things. It's good to get them in rudimentary, figure out if you like them before you put tons of effort into supporting them. But everyone has to explore that way. I'm sure any good dev team will tell you similar stories of like how in the act of trying to find the voice of the game, they did those things. The other one is people always presume that these games are made right the first time. Right. But I know, firsthand, I talked to some of the guys that did Gears of War, and everyone's like, oh my God, Gears of War's multiplayer is so great. And when I talked to the devs on that, they're like, yeah, dude, 5 months before we shipped, we didn't even think we were going to ship with multiplayer because we couldn't figure out how to make it fun. Nice. And a guy came in and spent a weekend experimenting with it and actually finally found the right cadence and the right rhythm to make what ended up being a very unique cover shooter mechanic for Gears, which ultimately became a very ownable thing for that thing. Now, obviously, don't just put in cover-based mechanics because another game did it. Do it because it supports the fantasy of your game. That would be one thing you notice. We do not have cover-based mechanics because sumo crouching would never crouch behind a wall because he's a big boy.
Also, cover-based mechanics, people can just like soar over your cover and shoot down on you.
Are you queuing up some sumo stuff? Yeah. Or wait, what do you?
Yeah. Do we want to go to sumo or?
Let's finish off the stranded stuff.
Some of like the storyboard type stuff.
So for those of you who are new, Stranded is our first level that we've been working on.
And we had an episode with our level designer Derek, which is on YouTube if you missed it.
Definitely check it out.
And so, as I said, what happened was when we first started talking about Stranded, I was trying to basically say, let's take you to a more memorable location with stronger landmarking and a sense of place and orientation. And so rather than just having these kind of ambiguous planets, I said, let's actually build a disabled spaceship in the middle of an asteroid belt. And the idea is now when I stand on the surface, I know what's up, I know what's down, I know what's left, I know what's right. Versus when we were on the planets, I really was constantly disoriented of like, where are people and where am I trying to get to and why am I trying to get to and things like that. So we felt that the fantasy of raiding a spaceship was a stronger, more coherent fantasy, especially with the idea of raiders and pirates. And so we quickly gravitated to this idea of like, how do we build these more memorable locations and worlds? And so I had built a very rudimentary map, and then our concept artists came in and started building really quick sketches that were in black and white. You're seeing some of those behind us right now, of just kind of feel and scale and a little bit of storytelling that we could kind of latch onto as we dove deeper into this.
Was there a big cat in one of these? I could have sworn there was a giant like cat in the background of one of these.
I don't remember a big cat.
Where?
There's an elephant right there.
Okay, see, there are animals.
Elephant?
There are animals. Like there was
Danny.
one that looked like a giant beast.
Artists slip things in
Where?
sometimes.
Oh, okay, that was it. No, it was one of them
Right.
that looked like a giant like saber tooth somewhere in the background. And now that we've seen the elephant, I might not be totally crazy.
Right.
This is how Easter eggs happen.
Yeah. So this is just sketches of playing with ideas of what the ship could be like. There's at some point. This was very blue sky for the artists,
Right.
and just having fun drawing stuff out. You really work hard when it comes to level design of having designers and artists work together so that the art supports the vision and flow of the gameplay that we want to accomplish. But there's also great times where the artists challenge the designer and say, hey, this could be aesthetically more appealing, or could we try this because it might actually really make this space even more memorable than what you thought of as a designer. So I'm a big believer in teaming up a designer that's working in 3D with an artist early on, so they're challenging each other and kind of pushing and pulling, and that the final result is something that's a combination of the best intentions of the artist and kind of the design thinking of the designer kind of coming together. I don't believe you pass it over the wall. You literally have to stay engaged from both sides constantly. And then as things evolve even more, you want to start getting a programmer in and a sound designer in that can also look at that level, and they might have more things to add to the potential of the level. So then early on, we were playing with kind of these very brightly colored locations, and the idea was this isn't a battleship. This was more supposed to be kind of a cargo ship that was going to be resplendent with different things to go and loot and steal and break open. And so we were kind of playing with different elements of that in these early sketches. Now, this was them really trying to support the...
But the maps have to work for all the game types, or will some game types be on certain maps?
Our aspiration is to get most of our game types to work on all maps. But you're going to find out that we're not necessarily following the templates of other games on stuff. So we're not doing capture the flag where you just mirror the map and everyone is, all gameplay is perfectly equal. We are going to do an attack defend mode where one team's already on the ship trying to defend it, and the other team is shooting over to the ship trying to basically break in and do whatever they're trying to do. I believe with minor tweaks, we're going to be able to make Stranded work with that. We already have Plunder working with it, which will be both teams are launching over, and they have the same goal of raiding and getting as much loot off as possible. We have a variant of King of the Hill that we're going to be playing with. I don't want to go too deep in some of these modes because we're still trying to discover them, but one of the things about it is every one of our modes has to support the high fantasy of plundering and looting. So even when it's Assault, even when it's King of the Hill, it's not going to be like you won because you had 2 points and the other team had 1 point. It's going to start, I want it couched in or supporting the fantasy of being, a looter and a raider. And part of that is, part of the gameplay isn't just fighting each other, but you have a drone that your team owns that comes in and picks stuff up. We have hopes that in the future that drone will be customizable. That will not be, just move that. That will not be in the initial launch. That we feel that will be part more of the live plan, where once people start to get a rhythm of the game, then allowing you to customize your drone as well as your character will be a really cool upgrade.
I want a drone plushie
for
so
more
bad.
advanced players and things like that.
And the other thing that, on top of the fantasy for, are we dead?
Oh, no.
Okay,
He's
sorry. So on top of matching the fantasy of being pirates and raiders, there's also one of our core kind of mechanic, gameplay pillars, which is making sure that you're always able to combine the combat and the traversal.
Yep.
Right. So the idea of one of the things that we played with is kind of your more standard King of the Hill mode, earlier on, where you go in and the hill periodically moves throughout the map, but it when you just have this zone that you sort of have to stand in that doesn't really support the traversal, the combination of traversal and combat that we were going for. So right.
I want to revisit that just because our other mistake with King of the Hill was we only had sumos, and all sumos are close combat people, so you just had 8 sumos piling into a small zone, everyone bottoming up and throwing people out of the map.
Yeah.
And it was really fun for a while, but it was also kind of ridiculous. And I do think that revisiting King of the Hill, once we have multiple character types, will probably stretch and challenge people to read those places better. The other one is to probably make sure that the zones for King of the Hill are not super tight, so that you can spread out and find some cover. Someone might need to actually come into the zone to hunt you down and figure out where you are. So it's not so obvious of like, well, they're standing in a 15 by 15 or a 15 radius circle, and I just throw a bunch of explosives in there and win. Right. So we will have to adapt our version of King of the Hill to support our style of gameplay, which is why I say some of the things we're going to do are going to be tweaked, because the importance of traversal, the importance of these different character types playing together will dictate that our game plays differently than quite a number of other games do. So we're a little bit on a path of discovery on that right now. So I'm giving you an early insight into kind of how we're trying to do that. We do plan on having a public test server, but it's going to be probably much closer to the end of the year before that starts ramping up. And that's a very loose goal.
I think if I'm correct in interpreting some Ghost, like the public test servers are usually things where people can test changes that are coming down the pipe, like they're not on the live branch. Okay.
And I think we will eventually have that because that's part of the process with these live service games is we are always working on new content to ramp in, but we have to find ways of testing that and getting feedback before we go live, because you don't want to unbalance the game. So you use a public test server to kind of make sure everything's sane before you launch it. Obviously, there's always rebalancing to be done, but we will try our best to keep things as sane as possible.
Well, and right now we're in kind of the reason why we're doing this episode right now is because we're in kind of a transition mode right now. We're in the next phase of things. So there are some changes coming. So do you have any insights into?
So the thing with the PTS on all platforms, that's a little bit of a negotiation that we're going to have to do with, if we want to be on Xbox and PlayStation, we need to figure out what their process is for those things. I believe that they're getting much more friendly to those. It used to be that was not really a thing that they embraced, but I think Fortnite really broke that open in a lot of ways. But I can't promise what's going to happen on the console platforms, just because that's a negotiation with a third party, which is Xbox and PlayStation. I know on PC we'll have a lot more straight control of that. But we would love to be able to do public test servers on all the platforms, because while our core fantasy is going to be the same, how the game plays on controller will have minor differences, and obviously how we support combat on a controller versus a mouse and keyboard will have minor differences.
Do you have? I was going to say, the sumo. So he was talking about sumo earlier. Sumo was our first character. So a lot of the early testing, where he was saying issues with the King of the Hill, was because we only had sumo. But he himself, like with the game, has had a huge evolution. So we have some of the, these are just the earliest sketches.
So originally, before Dell or Hayden even came on, there was originally a kind of spitball idea of organic creatures versus the robots, the bots versus the orgs, and so Sumo was originally a purely robotic character, and it's evolved. Sumo. That's why our wiki page for a really long time, and maybe even still, says Sumo 79 at the top. He was our robot bruiser, and has come a long way from there.
He's no longer a robot.
He's now a Scottish drunk.
A little bit backwards.
Scottish
Sumo is Scottish.
Why we're drinking
or Irish?
Scotch.
I thought it was Irish. Overwatch does all PTR on PC, so it's probably still difficult on console. If Overwatch still does it on PC.
I mean, unfortunately, it's a little bit out of my straight knowledge. That's going to be more about our network and our programmers kind of figuring things out. I get it. but I do think that there are probably ways where we're going to try to be a little bit more vigilant on that, or see if we can negotiate. A lot of it was, for a long time, the consoles didn't want it to happen, but I think they've...
Thanks for the Irish representation.
But they've gotten a lot more friendly to allowing those type of testing. Even, for a long time, you couldn't even do free-to-play games on console,
right.
And they've really changed their mind in some ways because they were forced to. Like, Fortnite really changed the world for a lot of conventions on stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they have to say.
Well, because it used to be like, you launch a game, like it used to be you launch a game and that's it.
Yeah.
And then it was you launch a game, you maybe have some updates. And now we're in, I don't know, the live games era, the games as a service era where, I mean, there are some, mostly in the mobile space, but there are games that are potentially getting updated every week, or even there are some that are getting updates every day, which is insane to me. But that's
Well, it's not though, because when you can build it in a way, and we're building it this way, where we are going to do, we are going to be doing major patches. Will actually change the executable or update the data in a way where we actually have to upload a patch.
right.
But a lot of things we can do will be simply data driven. That gun is doing 15 points of damage. We want it to do 12 points of damage per shot instead. I just changed the data on a central cloud database someplace. There is no patch. It simply goes, oh, my new number is 12. Sweet. Let's just go forward. So there's two ways of balancing the game now. There's major upgrades where we had to change the actual code. And then there's minor tweaks where we can simply change data in order to, just refine over time. Once we realize after thousands of people play as Resistor, he's doing a little bit too much gun damage with his gyro rifle, so we can come back in and retemper that so that
even things out.
Now, the other thing that's nice about that is because we have to check against a central database, we get to catch cheaters. Anyone that goes in and tries to change those numbers, the central database will go, nope, that's a 12. I don't care what you tried to change it to. We will reset and check you on that. So there's some power in it too, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Cross-platform, too early to answer that. Sorry.
Yeah, the cross-platform, and we also have how many characters will there be at launch?
So our goal at launch is 8 characters, and then we will be trying to get into a rhythm where we're introducing new characters at a fairly consistent clip. I'm not going to give you a monthly
we don't know what the
statement
clip will
on
be.
that, but we have ideas already for 15 or 16 characters.
Yeah.
Our launch goal is around 8 characters, and then ideally, once we get a rhythm for it and figure out our outsourcing plans or our internally we just get better at making these assets, then we can try to get into a good clip on giving you guys stuff.
Yeah.
If you keep going, because these are still really early sumo.
Yeah. So this is
drawings.
all. So this is all within the first, I think, month or so of sumo being a character. I think this is, very different. Guy.
So Some Ghost, right now we are targeting early next year without giving a solid date. We're, the early part of next year is our initial launch window, we hope.
2020, man. It just seems like a made-up year. I'm sorry.
2020. We're already at 2020.
I know.
Yes, already in 2020 is the scariest.
It's a made-up year.
So anyway, like with sumo stuff, we'll pull it back to the actual themes that we meant to talk about. We really played a lot with like, how do we get character out of this guy? How do we have his personality be something that resonates with people? Because one of the challenges, so this is another place where you want to pull back and you have challenges for what the game should be and why it's going to draw people's attention. You also have challenges for Blind Squirrel and saying, well, what do we want to be good at? Do we want to be good at building characters and creating character-driven games? And so above and beyond what we think the game needs, there's the challenges we want to do for, as an original IP company, what should our strengths be, or where do we want to put our energy? And so we did feel kind of going hero shooter and emphasizing, interesting characters with unique abilities and personality is something I will talk to you about Battlefront 2 Space Battles in a bit. So we spent a lot of time working on different like what does his head look like and how expressive could that be? And actually now we have a really great artist that's come on that specializes in exactly that stuff. He worked on Wreck-It Ralph and worked on a bunch of things. So he's now doing really great head compositions of how expressive our character could be. And then the idea is, when you see Sumo, when you see him in silhouette, do you feel like, oh my God, that's a tank. That guy is going to be able to take a lot of damage. And you can see by the way we designed the armor, and he has an ability that when he gets at low health, the armor seals up and protects him, so he actually even gets more damage resistance for a while. That everything about Sumo needed to communicate that idea that when you see him coming, this is a tough son of a bitch, and I need to change my tactics, or I need to react to what's going on with him. You know, he runs around with a heavy wrecking ball, he has a shotgun, everything he is about is kind of close range threat. And then he uses his extra health to be able to close that distance in order to deliver that damage or to interact with people up front. So everything's kind of a combination of a high fantasy of how we want him to play, and then that dictates how we want him to look. And it also, whoa, and there's the charmer right there.
Yep.
So he's supposed to be kind of a jolly, not jolly, he's not Santa Claus, but
jocular.
Sure. He's not like an angry emo tanky guy. He actually like kind of lives for the thrill of the fight.
Well, we had him as like a mind worker, and just, he's a hardworking guy, but he has a sense of humor. But he's Irish, right? Is he still Irish? In early versions,
Irish or Scottish? I don't remember.
It would go back and forth.
Yeah. Sorry. So he, but that's exactly it. It's like we didn't want to just follow the typical memes. I think there's way too many games that have like the overly serious characters, and everyone's hardcore. And my friend said it really well when he talked about Gears of War, and he's like, "Dude, even their vocal cords have muscles." Right? It's just kind of like, so we were like, "Well, let's avoid that. And let's have a little bit more fun with these characters." They're the same, no worries. I am pretty certain you would start a war if Edward said that in the British Isles. So back to...
And there's him using his grapple.
Yeah, so that's him using his grapple. That we're trying to get some of his personality to come across. We're trying to get some of the power of him to come across, which, it'd be interesting when we show you guys other characters and show you like how lithe and kind of nimble someone like Zola looks like compared to him. And where we're trying to get to is having that great lineup. I mean, obviously Overwatch does this so brilliantly, where you see the lineup of all the characters next to each other, and you're like, ooh, I want to play that one, and I want to play that one. And you have a really great sense of who they probably are just by their posture, their equipment. So you really kind of already have a very great impression of their personality before you even pick up the controller. Right. And that is an aspiration for us. There you go. So this is some of the newest drawings we've been doing with Sumo, where we have Jeff, who worked for Disney stuff for a long time, did Wreck-It Ralph.
He did American Tail.
He worked on
Mark of Cree.
Mark of Cree back in the day. And you can see how much personality he's getting out of Sumo's face. We're blocking one of the best ones, but where he's just kind of...
there you go.
There you go. Now we're gone. That's the best way to see Sumo. But you can just see his personality come across. I absolutely love that skull that he drew for Sumo. I kind of want it as a t-shirt.
That would be a good t-shirt.
Yeah. And so like you can see how far we're really trying to take this. Now, look, guys, not everything's going to make it into the game just because we still are a small team and a small, but we are hoping that over time that this is the type of strength of personality and presence these characters are going to have.
We've already got some pretty great stuff. Like I think my favorite personality right now is Ziggy, where he like when he walks, he kind of like does the astronaut float, and his feet just kind of dangle. Like he's a fart in a spacesuit. I think that was like one of the original.
Let's keep on perpetuating that one.
Yeah.
The main idea is he's very floaty, so that the way his feet don't really have to touch the ground because he's basically almost weightless in a lot of ways, and so he has the ability to move around, and he has kind of a whimsical kind of movement
he's
to
so
him
silly. I love
because he doesn't have to have that weight to him.
Yeah.
They are giving us a lot of opportunities to kind of express, and that's a place. Brian was on about a month ago now, right?
Probably, about that.
But very talented animator, and he's really
Mhm.
working hard to introduce a lot of this personality to these characters. And so working with concept, those guys are drawing kind of inspiration poses, and then we try to take that and say, well, what would that look like in motion, or how do we get that to really stand out when these guys are on the battlefield so that you feel their personality coming across.
Yeah.
Well, and I like seeing the whole evolution of of sumo, where you really see you had the sketches of the different head types, and it was just trying to find out the silhouette. You had the actual silhouette, the whole body. Then it went to the silhouette of the head, and now we're now we've refined them enough where we can concentrate on facial
The skull.
expressions.
Yeah.
That this is we're distilling it down farther and farther and farther, and now we're at the farthest step where it's okay. Let's fine tune his facial expressions and the character.
And it's interesting. At each character we explore, like there's a lot of beats on that. Like Ziggy, I'm not going to linger out too long because it's not a Ziggy episode. But originally Ziggy was drawn with a space helmet on, and one, we don't care about space helmets. We're going to be out in space, but everyone's not going to have helmets on
That's not
because
realistic.
yes, I know. This is why we're doing it.
That's not science.
Space Jam isn't realistic either, but I know.
Wait.
Whoa.
Okay, wait.
Whoa.
You're really messing up my day here.
So we basically just said, look, it's about the high fantasy here. It's not about realism. But also with Ziggy, it wasn't even about the realism of the helmet. It was, he is a sentient gas cloud. So having the helmet on actually completely meant we didn't see who his personality was. And so as soon as we took the helmet off, and now there's this wick of like gas in his eyes, and actually his head can transform. Like we have a really funny animation where it's an emote. If he likes people, it turns into a heart.
Oh, you sent me that video.
Yeah.
One day we'll get that on
we'll
here.
get that
It's
photo
awesome.
videos.
It's
Exactly. This is not a realism simulator. Good quote, some goes. So we're just trying to have like the whole idea is here is let's have fun. Yeah. Let's have fun with the characters, their presence, the places we're going, the fantasies that we are embracing. So yes,
some ghost is new to the stream because Eric alerts us that our time is running out by putting this on. But now we have a Dom. This
and now
is
we
new.
have Sam and Dom.
Sam and Dom.
Eric, what do you? No, Eric always puts the dancing squirrels on when it's this is our swan song. It's time to go.
Yeah.
All feet are sane, and then now we have a Dom.
Yes.
Wow.
Cue Eric.
Yes. Don't. He's going to capture you too.
So
Zen said, "I'm counting on you."
No, Captain Crispy's the one that made these gifts.
Oh, really?
Oh, is it nice?
Oh, you made that one? Okay. He sent us some on the Discord though.
So there was a question a little earlier about someone asking me about space battles in Battlefront 2 and if this tied into it. A little bit. Star Wars is a totally different beast, and that was definitely the original inception of space battles in Star Wars 2 was we had vehicles down on the planet and they worked miserably. Like the scale of our maps to be fun for vehicles and infantry in Battlefront 2 meant starfaring craft did not feel good. They flew too fast. They don't really hover. You look at Battlefield, they really rely a lot more on helicopters because they can stop and hover and maneuver around and interact with infantry at a more refined level, and jets and things like that. And by the way, TIE fighters and X-Wings are supposed to be even faster than jets. Mm-hmm. And so when we originally put them in the maps in Battlefront 1, they just felt like trash. And so the proposal was...
I loved them. Anyway, sorry.
The proposal was for us to say, let's build space maps so that we can build a place where actually these StarCraft would feel appropriate and the goals they're trying to accomplish and the type of ways we would use them would feel more in tune with the fantasy of Star Wars.
Right.
And also let us kind of have a whole different rhythm of combat that would be exclusive to our space maps. So in that way, I would say we approach the philosophy of Drifters of saying, well, what's exclusive to our maps? Because our characters can do all these cool things and have this three-dimensional space, once again, we're looking for what's unique to our game and how to support it the best. A lot of how Battlefront played was still very traditional shooter, very, that's an ancient game now. And so it was just a different time for what was going on. But definitely, I think having that experience and saying, space gives us the freedom to think differently about the way we want to engage our players or even the fantasies they're going to be doing. It's not a one-to-one parallel, but I would tell you I do think that it probably informs some of the choices I made and what we're doing with Drifters now. Long term, I would love to think about vehicles in this game, but that's way far out. I think that's
you heard it here first, folks.
That's a glimmer in my eye. I don't think that's been in anyone else's. How are we doing on time?
Well, I think we're just about done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you guys...
One more thing. So we had a question on the Reddit page about having open betas and whether or not we would allow people to be doing like streams and making content during those times. And so that is, I just wanted to, because we do want to get in a better habit of answering some of those questions from Reddit over in here. That is something that we do need to figure out, because like if a publisher picks us up, they're going to have some concerns about that. So the answer is we would like to, and we think it's a great idea, and we just need to see how that works out for us.
Yeah, as we get closer to those dates, I think we'll have more concrete answers on those types of things. We love that you guys are supportive, and we would love to do more and more to make that a better simpatico relationship between us. But as you said, if a publisher gets involved, they'll have their restrictions.
Right.
We don't want to be streaming stuff that's not reflective of the quality of the experience we want you guys to be. So there might be kind of like a closed alpha that's like, hey, we want your feedback, but not distributing out to the public yet. And then we might get to the point where there's a beta where it's like, now it's legit, let's get some streams out there, let's let you guys start talking about it. That's really, unfortunately, that's at least 6 to 8 months away before those are really going to be things we're trying to address. But it's great you're asking those questions. I love everything you guys are asking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just understand we're going to have to be able to say sometimes, let's get back to you on that.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Eric's saying time.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you guys all so much for joining us on the stream and for continued participation on Reddit and Discord.
Yes.
Please feel free to follow us on Twitch. Go to our
Twitter
and
Twitch.
Twitter.
And
I just figured because they're on here, they probably are already.
Well, you never know.
You can send more people our way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. But thank you guys.
This stream goes on to YouTube tomorrow, so you can share it. So
share it
with all your friends.
But yeah, thank you all so much, and we will see you next week.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.